We're going to finish off this garden bed today, clear out some of the unwanted plants, fill it, complete our treated timber wall on the other side, put a rock wall through here.
I'm attaching the H-bar to the structural part of the deck to lock in these treated timber sleepers. Assemble the wall ground height.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
We're going to finish off this garden bed today, clear out some of the unwanted plants, fill it, complete our treated timber wall on the other side, put a rock wall through here. That's all part of completing this whole zone with our block wall and stone wall.
Building this retaining wall has created a central garden area, but we have a little more construction to complete the perimeter of it. We're constructing the treated timber retaining wall with this galvanized H-bar. So I have to pre-drill some holes in the steel H-bar so we can attach it to these sleepers and complete this perimeter so we can start filling in our garden bed. I'm attaching the H-bar to the structural part of the deck to lock in these treated timber sleepers. I'm locking it in with a single screw to start with, so this way when we check it with our level we can adjust it to get it dead plumb. Once I check that it's perfectly vertical, I lock it in with another screw. I'm just adjusting these sleepers with some packers to get them to the right height before I drill some pilot holes and screw them off. I want to have 2 screws for each sleeper. So once I've put the screws in this H-bar, I move on to the other end of this timber retaining wall and screw them off into that H-bar. It's a tight area to work in with limited space due to the fact that we built this retaining wall around an existing garden, so there's some mature plants we're trying to look after whilst we build all our structure. That completes one of the retaining walls we're installing for this garden bed. We're leaving the other side open for the moment so we can remove plants and bring in rocks, dirt and gravel. Some of the plants are staying in this garden bed, but some need to be removed. So we did a bit of excavation and hacking back of unwanted plants before we started to build our rock wall. The idea was to build a natural, rough, dry stone wall, the same height as the top of our retaining wall, all across this garden. So we created a foundation out of recycled concrete, as this part of the wall wouldn't be seen because it was going to be buried under the soil. We added some gravel to the recycled concrete to stabilize it, and then we started adding our decorative pink granite stone. Building dry stone walls is time consuming and can be fiddly. One technique is to just work in a row of stones, making each stone sit snugly into the stone next to it. I stabilized some of these large stones using smaller rocks and gravel to backfill them. Once the first row of stones is stabilized, you can start adding rocks on top. Now that I have one end of the wall up to the height we need, I continue on the other end of the wall to lay the base out and continue just adding stones to build it up, and then just keep working along the wall, adding gravel and smaller rocks to lock things in. We don't have quite enough stone to get this wall as high as we'd like it in its finished state, but it's high enough now for us to add our volcanic gravel and some soil and get some plants in. While one side of the garden bed was still open, we were able to use the barrow to dump some of this volcanic gravel we wanted in the garden bed. We're adding this volcanic rock as a base layer to give this garden bed adequate drainage, and this rock also helps retain water for keeping healthy plants. I installed the treated pine sleepers. This completes all the walls for this inner garden bed. I also added some concrete to the base of these to lock them in and keep them solid. With the treated timber retaining wall in place, I add the rest of our volcanic gravel and then move on to building up the soil in front of the rock wall we're building. We've made a good start on this garden bed. It's got a few more things to be added before it's complete. We're going to be getting some more rock in, and we've got to fill up a lot more topsoil. Then the plants will go in.
I remember that day you gave me a smile as I got closer to you. All I could do was talk about the weather and when we go back to school. I saw you walking down the road, summer breeze blowing through your hair. By the time I moved, you were almost gone, and I didn't know what to say.
The next day we purchased and added more rock to get our wall to the right height, added more topsoil, and now the garden bed's ready for planting.
Another feature of this project was the treated timber that we carried all the way from our corner ramp system all the way up to this end point. This is the start of this yard. So we'll go through how I've set these in concrete with posts.
After removing some old timbers, we had to work on these pickets that were stuck in the ground. So I thought I'd take you through the process of how I remove a picket that's buried deep in the ground. When they won't come out after giving them a tap from side to side and just trying to pull them out, I use a leverage system. I grab a piece of 2x4 that's long enough, lay it next to the picket, prop it up with some timbers underneath for support, and then drill a hole and insert a screw in. The pickets I've been using have holes already in them, but sometimes you have to drill a hole in your piece of metal. This can work for wood pickets or steel pickets. But once you've attached your 2x4 to the picket, you use it like a lever. For really long pickets, you have to readjust your support timber and then lever it out. In this case, I had a number of pickets to remove, so I just removed the screw and just repeat the same process. With all the old structure cleared out of the way, it's time to set some heights. We already know where this little retaining wall's going to because we've got it started on the bottom corner of our ramp system, and we know where it has to end up, which is at the end of this shed. So I'm just using some scrap timbers that have the same dimensions as the timber we're going to be installing, so I can use these as props to get some levels. So by using these scrap timbers and my level, I can rough out where we're going to be putting this system. By removing some dirt and adjusting these scrap timbers, I can check with my level to establish the right height of this little retaining wall. With my heights established, the next thing to do is to figure out where we're going to put our little post holes. Often there's a formula for how far apart you should have post holes, but in this case we've already established part of this wall. So I'm using these scrap timbers to rough out where we're going to be putting these posts.
So this morning we're going to continue this timber wall up along this fence line, and because we've already established a sort of cascading level change as it goes down that ramp and continue the step design we have, we're going to incorporate the same system somewhere here. We're going to have a height change, so we're going to make an elevation change somewhere here in the system. We'll sort of figure it out as we go. Had to do a bit of ground preparation here before we built this wall. So we're using a lot of the dirt we excavated from here to fill the garden bed we just finished over in the centre of our system. So that way we're sort of doing two things at once, getting rid of this dirt, filling that garden bed ready for plants. We've got some scrap timber laying out where our posts are going to be every 800 mil. Just got to cut it to size, put posts on it, excavate some holes for the posts, and then add some concrete to hold it up. So when there's dirt and gravel behind it, it's not going to fall forward.
Now that we know where our posts are going, we know what length to cut our sleepers at. So I measure them out, mark them with my pencil, and cut them on the chop saw. Because of the width of these sleepers, we have to flip the timber over to get it cut all the way through. Once I've cut my timber, I double check it by putting it where it's going to belong in the wall. This helps me calculate the measurement for the next sleeper we're going to cut. I mark it out with my pencil, cut it on the chop saw like we did the other one, and then return it into position to make sure that we've got the right length. After having my two main pieces cut, it's a good opportunity to take a small break and enjoy the bird life that I have around me here.
By the time I moved, you were almost gone. I'm glad you said more than hello.
I'm now ready to measure and cut the posts we're going to use. These are just short posts, as this wall's not very high. Then we put a bevel on the edge of all the timbers to match the existing wall we've already half built. I almost always bevel the corners of this rough sleeper material, as it can have some nasty splinters on the corners. It also makes it look more attractive after it's beveled. With all our pieces cut to size, I lay the whole thing out on the ground to assemble the posts onto the sleeper. We measure and mark out our pattern for the posts, and then attach them with our heavy timber screws. And as usual, I'm always drilling a pilot hole before I insert the screws. I'm cutting a small piece that's part of the elevation height change in this wall. It matches the pattern of the pre-existing wall. And in that previous wall, we added a small angled cut piece as a segue for the elevation change in the wall. I'm adding a bevel on the edge so it matches the other timbers, and then we're trimming it to length. I now join the two halves of the wall together. I fix it off with a single screw so it has a pivot point so I can adjust it. I double check it with my level and my set square to make sure it's going to be parallel, and then lock in the other screws. I'm also adding some screws into the bottom of these short posts to help lock them into the concrete once we pour it. I have one small piece to rip down and add into the wall to complete its assembly before we start excavating our holes. Here I'm using a small wedge whilst cutting this timber, because sometimes the timber can bind in on the saw and jam it. So by adding a wedge, it opens the gap up and allows you to finish the cut. This short treated timber retaining wall is now fully assembled, and we'll move on to the next step. I'm excavating the holes for the posts that we're going to be pouring concrete in. Part of having the wall fully assembled with all the posts attached acts as a guide to where we need to dig our post holes. This way we can end up with really accurate holes, not too big or not too small, and dug to the right depth so we can get a really solid wall. We're now ready to assemble the wall into the holes we've excavated. Once we're satisfied everything's lined up with the pre-existing wall and ends nice and flush up on the shed end, we add concrete to our post holes. I'm just using my standard concrete mix. This time we're not adding any bondcrete additive because it doesn't have to join to any pre-existing concrete. We just try and take extra care when we're pouring this concrete in, not to let too much dirt cave in the system, because we don't want any dirt mixed in with the concrete as it weakens it. I'm filling the post holes up to ground height. We're not doing any finishing on this concrete because it's all going to be covered in gravel later.
I saw you walking all's gone.
Once we've filled all the post holes, we just double check the whole fence line to make sure we don't have any spilled concrete anywhere, as it's a lot easier to wash it off now when it's still wet. In the next episode, we complete the ramp area with a little more concrete foundation and then add our bricks and gravel to complete the whole pathway. Thanks for joining me this week in my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.